The moment my heart stopped, I expected darkness, maybe a tunnel, maybe nothing at all. What I didn't expect was to open my eyes and see a light so impossibly bright it should have burned straight through my retinas, yet somehow I could look directly into it without pain. And standing in that light was a man whose eyes held something I had never seen in my 34 years of life. Something that made every Sunday sermon, every Bible study, every worship song I'd ever sung feel like I had been playing at religion without ever touching the real thing. Jesus looked at me with a love so complete it shattered me, and with a sorrow so deep I wanted to die all over again just to escape it. And then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of eternity itself. "Marcus," he said, and somehow he made my name sound like both a welcome and a lament. "You called me Lord for 12 years, but there's something you've been doing every single day, multiple times every day, that has kept you from truly knowing me." I want to tell you what he showed me. I need to tell you. Because if you're listening to this right now, if something made you click on this story, I believe it's because you need to hear what I heard. But first, you need to understand who I was before I died. My name is Marcus Bennett. I'm a paramedic. Or I still am. It's complicated when you die and come back. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, with my wife Sarah and our 2 kids, Emma, who's 8, and Caleb, who's 5. I grew up in church, got saved when I was 14 at a youth camp, never really had a rebellious phase. I was the good kid. The one who didn't drink in high school, who saved myself for marriage, who went to a Christian college and met Sarah at a campus ministry event. We had what everyone called a blessed life. Good jobs, healthy kids, a nice house in a safe neighborhood, active in our church community. I worked as a paramedic for Nashville Fire Department Station 17, and I genuinely believed God had called me to that work. Every time I saved a life, every time I held someone's hand as they took their last breath, I felt like I was doing ministry. I prayed before every shift. I had a small Bible in my gear bag. My colleagues knew I was a Christian, not because I was obnoxious about it, but because I tried to be different, tried to be better. Our church, Cornerstone Community, was one of those big non-denominational places with the lights and the professional worship band and the coffee shop in the lobby. 3 services every Sunday. I was there for the 9 a.m. one, almost never missed it. I was in a men's Bible study on Wednesday mornings before my shift, led by Pastor Rick, who everyone loved because he kept things practical and didn't get too theological. I served on the parking team once a month, wore the neon yellow vest, directed traffic with a smile. Sarah sang in the choir. We tithed faithfully, 10% off the top, sometimes more when there was a special missions offering. On paper, we were model Christians. The kind of couple other people looked at and thought, that's what it should look like. But here's what nobody knew, what I didn't even fully know about myself until Jesus showed me. There was something rotting inside me, something I did so automatically, so constantly, that it had become as natural as breathing. And Jesus told me that this sin I'm about to describe, is destroying 97% of everyone who calls themselves a believer. 97%. He actually gave me that number, and when I tried to argue with him about it, when I tried to say surely it couldn't be that many, he just looked at me with those eyes that see straight through every defense, every excuse, every comfortable lie we tell ourselves, and he said, "Marcus, you were one of them. You still are. That's why I'm showing you this. I need you to understand what happened the night I died, because the physical details matter." It was a Tuesday in October, unseasonably warm, The kind of night where the air feels thick and restless. I was working a 24-hour shift, had been on since 7 a.m. that morning. By 11 p.m., I'd already run 8 calls, everything from a diabetic emergency to a cardiac arrest that we couldn't bring back, an old man who died in his recliner watching the news while his wife screamed in the kitchen. That's the job. You run from crisis to crisis. You see people on what's often the worst day of their entire lives, and you have to stay calm, stay clinical, stay professional. But you also have to stay human, and that's the hard part. That's the part they don't teach you in paramedic school. At 11:47 p.m., the tones dropped. Engine 17, Medic 17, respond to Interstate 40 eastbound at mile marker 213. Multiple vehicle accident with entrapment. Injuries unknown. My partner Jake was driving. I was in the passenger seat pulling on my gloves before we even hit the street. The address put us about 4 miles out. Jake hit the lights and sirens and we rolled. I remember looking out the window at the city sliding past. All those lit windows in all those buildings, thousands of people going about their Tuesday night with no idea that in about 8 minutes my life was going to end. When we pulled up on scene, it was worse than dispatch had described. 3 cars, maybe 4. It was hard to tell because they were so mangled together. A sedan had tried to change lanes, clipped a pickup truck. The pickup had overcorrected and rolled, and a small SUV behind them had slammed into the whole mess. The interstate was completely blocked. State troopers were already there, had the eastbound lanes shut down, flares burning orange in the darkness. I could smell gasoline and burnt rubber and that particular smell of deployed airbags, kind of like burnt popcorn mixed with chemicals. Jake and I went to work. First rule of mass casualty, triage fast. Figure out who needs you most, who can wait, who's already gone. The pickup driver was unconscious but breathing, stable enough for the moment. The sedan driver was walking around in shock, kept asking about his phone, didn't even realize his arm was broken. But the SUV, that's where it got bad. A young woman, couldn't have been more than 25, was trapped in the driver's seat. The entire front end had accordion folded into the cabin. Her legs were pinned. She was conscious, screaming. And I could see she was pregnant, very pregnant, maybe 7 or 8 months. "Please," she kept saying, "please, my baby, please." I got up close to her window. Glass was shattered but still in the frame. "Ma'am, I'm Marcus. I'm a paramedic. We're going to get you out, okay? What's your name?" "Ashley," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Ashley Morrison. Please, I can feel something wrong. Something's wrong with the baby." Fire department was on scene now, bringing the jaws of life, the heavy rescue equipment. My captain, Henderson, was coordinating the extrication. I stayed with Ashley, kept talking to her, kept her focused on my voice. I got a blood pressure cuff on her arm. Her vitals were all over the place. Pressure dropping. Heart rate climbing. Not good. I radioed for a second ambulance, told them we needed to move fast. The firefighters started cutting into the vehicle, the hydraulic tools screaming against metal. Ashley was fading, going into shock. I squeezed her hand. "Stay with me, Ashley, stay with me. Think about your baby. What are you having, boy or girl?" "Girl," she whispered. "Her name is going to be Grace." "That's a beautiful name," I said, and I meant it. And in that moment, I was completely present, completely focused on this woman and her daughter, on doing everything in my power to save them both. And then I heard the sound that every first responder dreads. Tires squealing, someone screaming a warning. I looked up and saw headlights, way too close, way too fast. A semi-truck, the driver had fallen asleep or wasn't paying attention, or maybe he was drunk. I'll never know. He plowed into the back of the accident scene, doing at least 50 miles an hour. I had maybe half a second to register what was happening. I tried to move, tried to get clear, but there was nowhere to go. The truck hit a state trooper's cruiser, sent it spinning directly into me. I remember the impact, the sensation of my body being crushed between the cruiser and Ashley's SUV, metal and flesh and bone all compressing into a space that couldn't hold them. I remember thinking very clearly, this is it. This is how I die. And then everything went black, except it didn't stay black. That's the thing about death, or at least my death. There was no transition, no sense of time passing. One instant, I was being crushed on Interstate 40 in Nashville, Tennessee, and the next instant, I was standing in a place that had no physical location, no up or down, no ground beneath my feet, but somehow I wasn't falling. And there was a light. God, the light. I've tried to describe it to people since I came back, and I can't. There are no words in English or any other human language that can capture what that light was like. It wasn't just brightness. It was alive. It was conscious. It was looking at me, seeing me, knowing me in a way that made me feel completely naked, completely exposed, and yet somehow completely safe at the same time. And then he stepped out of the light. Or maybe he was the light. I couldn't tell. Jesus. I knew it was him immediately. Not because he looked like the paintings in Sunday school or the movies, but because my soul recognized him. Have you ever met someone and felt like you'd known them your entire life? Multiply that by infinity and you might get close to what I felt. He was tall, or I perceived him as tall, but dimensions seemed fluid there. His face was kind but also terrible in its purity, like looking at something so good, so perfectly good, that it showed you every spot and stain on your own soul by contrast. His eyes were dark, deep, ancient, and when he looked at me, I felt like he was seeing not just Marcus Bennett, the paramedic, but every version of Marcus that had ever existed or could ever exist, every choice, every thought, every secret thing I'd ever hidden from everyone, including myself. "Marcus," he said, and his voice was like distant thunder and like a whisper directly in my ear at the same time. "Do you know why you're here?" I tried to speak but found I didn't have a physical voice, but somehow I could communicate, thought to thought. "I died," I said, or thought, or whatever it was. "On the interstate. I was trying to save that woman Ashley and her baby. Did they make it? Please tell me they made it." Jesus smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Ashley is alive. Grace was born 6 weeks later, healthy and strong. You gave them those extra minutes they needed. Your body shielded Ashley from the worst of the secondary impact." Relief flooded through me. "Thank God," I said. "Thank you." "But that's not why you're here, Marcus," Jesus continued. "You're not here because you died a hero. You're here because there's something you need to see, something you need to understand. You've been calling me Lord for 12 years. You've read my words, sung my praises, served in my name. But Marcus, there's a gulf between us that you've never recognized, a wall you've been building brick by brick, day by day, and it's made of something you've convinced yourself isn't even sin." I felt fear then, real fear, not the fear of the moment before the crash, but something deeper, existential. "What do you mean?" "I've tried to live right. I've tried to follow you. I'm not perfect. I know I sin, but I confess it. I repent. I try to do better." "Show him," Jesus said, not to me, but to someone or something I couldn't see. And then everything changed. If this story is speaking to your heart right now, I want you to stay with me, because what comes next is what Jesus really wanted me to share. What he showed me in that moment changed everything I thought I understood about faith, about salvation, about what it really means to follow him. I thought I was a good Christian. I was wrong. And if you're still listening, if something made you keep playing this, I believe it's because you need to see what I saw. The space around me shifted, or maybe I shifted. I couldn't tell the difference. Suddenly, I was watching myself, but not from my own perspective. I was seeing Marcus Bennett from the outside, like watching a movie, except this movie was my life, and every scene was crystal clear, more vivid than my actual memories. Jesus stood beside me, his presence steady and solid, an anchor in a sea of images that began to flood past us. What you're about to see, he said, is not what you think. I'm not going to show you the obvious sins, Marcus. I'm not going to replay the time you lost your temper and yelled at Sarah over something trivial, or the moments you were impatient with your children, or even the times you looked at women who weren't your wife with thoughts you shouldn't have had. You know those are sins. You've confessed them. You've asked for forgiveness. This is about something else, something you've never once confessed because you've never once recognized it as sin. The first scene materialized around us. I was in the Station 17 break room 6 months earlier, sitting at the table with Jake and 2 other paramedics, Derek and Christina. We were eating lunch, talking about a call from the previous day. A rookie from Station 9 had made a mistake, had given the wrong dosage of medication to a patient who ended up coding in the ER. The patient survived, but it had been close. I watched myself take a bite of sandwich and say, I don't know how someone that incompetent made it through paramedic school. Did he even read a textbook? That's basic pharmacology. If you can't handle the pressure, get out of emergency medicine. The other guys laughed. Christina shook her head in agreement. It was just break room talk, the kind of venting that happens in every firehouse and every hospital in America. But Jesus paused the scene. Look at your face, he said. I looked at myself, frozen in that moment, and I saw something I'd never noticed before. There was satisfaction there, a smugness in my expression. I wasn't just frustrated about professional incompetence. I was enjoying feeling superior. I was enjoying the judgment. That rookie's name was Tyler, Jesus said quietly. He was 23 years old. He'd failed out of college twice before finding his calling in emergency medicine. His father told him he'd never amount to anything. When he made that mistake, when he almost killed that patient, he went home and sat in his car in his driveway for 2 hours contemplating suicide. He prayed to me, Marcus. He begged me to help him, to show him if he was supposed to quit, if he was as worthless as he felt. And that same night, you sat in your comfortable home and never thought about him again. You judged him, dismissed him, and moved on. I felt something crack inside my chest. I didn't know, I said. How could I have known? You didn't ask, Jesus replied. You didn't wonder. You didn't consider that there might be a story behind the mistake, a human being struggling behind the error. You just judged. And Marcus, that's what I'm showing you. Watch. The scenes began to move faster. I was in church sitting in the 3rd row like always, and Pastor Rick was preaching. But I wasn't really listening. In my head, I was critiquing the sermon. The theological precision wasn't quite right. He was being too soft on sin, too focused on grace, without enough emphasis on holiness. He was trying too hard to be relevant, using pop culture references that felt forced. I watched my own face, saw the slight sneer, the internal eye roll. And Jesus said, Rick prepared that sermon for 20 hours. He was trying to reach a 17-year-old girl in the back row who was cutting herself every night, who needed to hear that I loved her before she could hear anything else. His words saved her life. But you sat there judging his delivery. Another scene. I was at home, and Sarah had forgotten to pick up my prescription from the pharmacy like she'd promised. I watched myself sigh, watched that flash of irritation cross my face. I didn't yell. I didn't even say anything harsh. I just thought it. How hard is it to remember one simple thing? She's home all day with the kids. She has time. She just doesn't prioritize what's important to me. And Jesus said Sarah had been awake since 4 a.m. because Caleb had a fever. She'd called the pediatrician, taken him to an appointment, picked up his medication, comforted Emma, who was scared her brother was really sick, managed the house, made dinner, and in the exhaustion and worry, yes, she forgot your allergy prescription. But you didn't ask about her day. You just judged her as careless. Scene after scene after scene. I was at a red light and a homeless man approached my window with a cardboard sign. I didn't roll down the window. In my head I thought, get a job. I'm not enabling addiction. Jesus said, his name is Thomas. He's a veteran. He has PTSD. He's been trying to get help for 3 years, but the VA system is broken and he has no family. That morning, he prayed for just one person to see him as human. You saw him as a problem. I was at the grocery store and a woman in front of me in line was using food stamps and her cart was full and some of the items seemed unnecessary and I thought, must be nice to live off my tax dollars and still buy name brand cereal. Jesus said she's a single mother of 3. Her husband died in a construction accident. She works 2 jobs. Those name brand items were because it was her daughter's birthday and she wanted to give her one special thing. But you judged her as lazy and entitled. I was in Bible study and another member, Robert, shared a struggle he was having with his faith, some doubts about prayer, about why God seemed silent sometimes. And in my head, I thought, that's such a shallow understanding of theology. If he'd actually studied Scripture instead of just showing up once a week, he'd know the answer. Jesus said Robert's daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. He'd been praying for healing for 8 months. He was losing his faith, and he came to that Bible study as a last desperate attempt to find hope. He needed compassion. You gave him internal contempt. The scenes kept coming, and I wanted them to stop. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. I didn't have eyes to close. I was just consciousness witnessing the absolute truth of who I had been. Every judgment, every critical thought, every moment of feeling superior to someone else. The co-worker who was overweight, and I thought he lacked discipline. The neighbor who didn't maintain his lawn, and I thought he was lowering property values. The woman at church whose kids were loud during service, and I thought she was a bad mother. The man who cut me off in traffic, and I thought he was a selfish idiot. The patient who overdosed for the 3rd time, and I thought he was a waste of resources. On and on and on. A relentless parade of judgment, judgment, judgment. And the worst part, the part that made me want to stop existing entirely, was that I had never once, not one single time, considered any of this to be sin. I thought I was discerning. I thought I was being righteous, holding to standards, refusing to lower the bar. I thought my judgments were just observations, just facts, just the truth as I saw it. I never spoke most of them out loud, so I thought they didn't count. They were just thoughts, just opinions, just my internal commentary on the world around me. Marcus, Jesus said, and his voice was gentle but firm, do you remember what I said in my Sermon on the Mount? Do you remember the words you've read 100 times? And somehow I could hear my own voice, younger, reading from my Bible, "Judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again." The words hung in that impossible space, echoing with weight. "You thought that meant don't judge people's salvation," Jesus continued. "You thought it meant don't condemn someone to hell, but Marcus, it means exactly what it says. Stop judging. Stop the constant internal commentary where you position yourself as superior, as the standard, as the one who sees clearly while everyone else is flawed. Do you understand what judgment does? It's not just unkind. It's not just lacking in compassion. It separates you from me. Every single time you judge another person, you're playing God. You're setting yourself in my seat, and you can't be connected to me while simultaneously trying to be me. I tried to speak to defend myself, but what defense was there? I'd seen the evidence, thousands of moments, maybe tens of thousands. How many times a day had I judged someone? 5, 10, 20? Multiply that by 12 years of being a Christian, and the number was staggering. But I didn't mean I started. "Intention doesn't matter," Jesus said, and for the first time, his voice had an edge to it, not anger, but something harder, truth without cushioning. "You think sin is only about actions. You think because you didn't speak the judgment out loud, it wasn't real. Marcus, I told them that if a man looks at a woman with lust, he's already committed adultery in his heart. If the internal sin counts for lust, why would it not count for judgment? Why would it not count for pride? Why would it not count for hate?" "Hate?" I said, confused. "I never hated anyone." "You hated parts of them," Jesus said. "You hated their flaws. You hated their weaknesses. You hated the ways they didn't measure up to your standards. And Marcus, when you hate any part of my creation, when you judge any person I died for, you're hating a piece of me. I'm in them. I'm in Tyler the rookie paramedic. I'm in Thomas the homeless veteran. I'm in Robert, whose faith was breaking under grief. When you judge them, you judge me." The weight of it was crushing me. Or would have been crushing me if I'd had a body to crush. I understood now why his eyes held such sorrow when he first looked at me. He'd known. He'd seen every single judgment, every single moment of pride, every single time I'd elevated myself by diminishing someone else. "I'm so sorry," I said, and it felt completely inadequate, but it was all I had. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand. Please, I'm so sorry." "I know you are," Jesus said, and the gentleness returned to his voice. "But Marcus, here's what you need to understand. Here's what I need you to take back with you, because you are going back." That caught me off guard. Going back. But I died. I felt it. I know I died. "You did die," Jesus said, "but I'm sending you back. Not because you deserve it, not because you earned it, but because I have something I need you to do. I need you to tell them, Marcus. I need you to tell everyone who will listen about the silent sin that's destroying my church from the inside." He waved his hand, and suddenly we were somewhere else. Somewhere that made the previous visions look like pleasant memories. We were standing in what I can only describe as a courtroom, vast and terrible and holy. There was a throne, and Jesus was on it. But this wasn't the gentle Jesus who had been walking with me through my life. This was the Jesus of Revelation, the one with eyes like fire, the one before whom heaven and earth flee away. And there were people standing before him, countless people, and I could hear their voices. Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we cast out demons in your name? Didn't we do many mighty works in your name? And I heard his voice, terrible in its finality. I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. I've never shared this part publicly before. If you're still here, if you're still listening, I believe it's because you were meant to hear this. You were meant to understand what I understood in that moment. These people being turned away, they weren't atheists. They weren't people who'd rejected faith. They were people who had done religious things, impressive things, powerful things even, in Jesus' name. But he said he never knew them. How is that possible? How can you do miracles in someone's name and have them say they never knew you? And Jesus turned to me as if he'd heard my question, and he said, Marcus, you can use my name without knowing my heart. You can perform religious acts without ever surrendering your own pride. These people did works, yes, but they did them to be seen, to be praised, to feel superior. Their hearts were never transformed. They judged everyone around them as less righteous, less committed, less worthy, and they never once looked in the mirror and saw their own desperate need for grace. 97%, Jesus said. And we were no longer in the courtroom but back in that space of light, just the two of us. That's how many people who claim to follow me are trapped in this same cycle. 97% of those who call themselves Christians spend their days judging others while convincing themselves they're being discerning. They quote scripture about taking the log out of their own eye before pointing out the speck in their brother's eye, and then they immediately go back to examining everyone else's specks. They don't see it as sin because it feels righteous. It feels like they're defending truth, maintaining standards, protecting the faith. But Marcus, I never asked anyone to be the judge. I asked them to love. I wanted to argue with the number. 97% seemed impossible, too high. But then I thought about my church, about the men's Bible study, about the conversations in the parking lot after service. How much of it was judgment disguised as concern? Did you hear about so-and-so's daughter, pregnant at 16? What kind of parenting leads to that? I noticed the Johnsons haven't been coming to church lately, must not be committed to their faith. That new worship leader's songs are too contemporary, too focused on feelings instead of theology. Every sentence, a judgment. Every observation, a way of positioning ourselves as the ones who had it right, who understood, who were doing it correctly. But how do we discern then? I asked. How do we know what's right and wrong? How do we identify false teaching or recognize sin if we're not supposed to judge? Jesus smiled, and it was the smile of a teacher watching a student finally ask the right question. There's a difference between discernment and judgment, Marcus. Discernment is recognizing truth from lies. It's testing teaching against my word. It's having wisdom about situations and people. But discernment never makes you feel superior. It never comes with contempt. It never leads you to dismiss another person as worthless or beyond hope. Judgment, what you've been doing, what most of my followers do, is about positioning yourself above others. It's about creating hierarchies where you're near the top. It's about finding flaws in others that make you feel better about your own flaws. He gestured, and suddenly I could see something that looked like a tree, or maybe it was a river, I couldn't quite tell, but it was flowing with darkness, thick and oily. This is what judgment does, he said. Every time you judge someone, it's like dropping poison into a stream. The poison doesn't just affect that moment. It seeps into everything. It changes how you see people. It changes how you see yourself. It changes how you see me. Because Marcus, you can't truly love me if you don't love the people I created. And you can't love someone you're constantly judging. 1 John chapter 4, verse 20, he continued. And again I heard my own voice from memory, reading scripture, if anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. You read that verse, Marcus. You underlined it in your Bible, but you never applied it to your thoughts. You thought as long as you were nice to people's faces, as long as you helped them when they called 911, as long as you showed up to church and smiled and served, that was enough. But I see the heart. I see the thoughts. And your heart was full of judgment even while your mouth spoke kindness. That's not love. That's performance. The tree or river of darkness began to show me faces, people from my life. And I could see how my judgment of them had affected them, even the judgments I'd never spoken aloud. There's something about negative thoughts, about judgment, that people can sense even when it's not verbalized. The rookie Tyler had felt my contempt even though I'd been professionally polite. It had reinforced his father's voice in his head telling him he was worthless. Sarah had felt my disappointment even when I'd said it's okay about the forgotten prescription. It had added to her burden of feeling like she was failing as a wife and mother. Robert from Bible study had felt my internal dismissal of his doubts. It had pushed him one step closer to walking away from faith entirely. You see, Marcus, Jesus said, judgment doesn't just hurt you. It hurts everyone around you. It creates distance. It builds walls. And worst of all, it spreads. When you judge others, you give them permission to judge themselves more harshly. You reinforce the lie that they're not enough, that they'll never be enough, that they're too flawed for grace. And that lie, Marcus, that lie keeps people from me. Not because I reject them, but because they believe the judgments they sense from my followers and they assume I must feel the same way. I was weeping now, or whatever the spiritual equivalent of weeping is. No tears, but a grief so profound it felt like it was tearing me apart. How do I fix it? I asked. How do I undo 12 years of this? How do I change? You can't undo it, Jesus said simply. The past is written. The judgments happened. The damage was done. But Marcus, that's what grace is for. That's what my death was for. You can't fix your own sin. You never could. That's the point. What you can do is recognize it, truly recognize it, and let it break you. Let it shatter your pride. Let it destroy your illusion that you're a good person who just needs a little fine-tuning. You're not a good person, Marcus. Neither is anyone else. You're all broken, all stained, all desperately in need of something outside yourselves. That's why I came. That's why I died. Not to make good people better, but to make dead people alive. He reached out and touched my chest, right where my heart would have been if I'd had a physical body, and suddenly I felt it. The full weight of my sin, not just the judgment, but everything, every flaw, every failure, every moment of selfishness and pride and fear and anger, it should have destroyed me. The weight should have crushed me into nothing, but his hand on my chest held me together, held me up. This is what I bore on the cross, he said quietly. Not just yours, but everyone's. The weight of every judgment, every cruelty, every sin that ever was or ever will be. And Marcus, I did it willingly. I did it because I love you, because I love all of them, even in their brokenness. especially in their brokenness. But here's what you need to understand, he continued, and his voice became more urgent. Grace isn't a license to keep sinning. Grace isn't permission to keep judging and just say, well, Jesus forgives me, and move on. Grace is power to change. When you truly understand what I did for you, when you truly grasp the depth of your need and the height of my love, it transforms you. You don't judge others anymore because you see yourself in them. You see the same brokenness, the same struggle, the same desperate need for grace. And instead of feeling superior, you feel compassion. Instead of feeling contempt, you feel love. The space around us shifted again, and I found myself in what I can only describe as hell, though not the fire and brimstone version from medieval paintings. This was worse. This was separation. Complete and utter separation from everything good, everything true, everything loving. It was like being in a room where you were the only person who existed, but you were aware that others existed somewhere else, and you could never reach them, never touch them, never connect. You were alone with yourself forever, with your own thoughts, your own judgments, your own pride, and they echoed back at you endlessly with no escape. And there were people there, countless people, and they weren't being tormented by demons or burning in literal flames. They were tormenting themselves. They were trapped in their own judgments, their own self-righteousness, their own conviction that they were right and everyone else was wrong. They couldn't accept grace because they couldn't admit they needed it. They couldn't connect with others because they'd spent their whole lives elevating themselves above others. And now, in this place of eternal separation, they were getting exactly what they'd chosen, to be alone with their own superiority forever. This is what judgment leads to, Jesus said, and his voice was heavy with sorrow. Not because I send people here. I never send anyone here. They choose it. Every time they choose judgment over love, every time they choose pride over humility, every time they choose their own righteousness over my grace, they're choosing separation. They're choosing to build walls instead of bridges. And eventually, if they never repent, if they never surrender, those walls become permanent. This isn't my punishment, Marcus. This is their choice. I saw someone I recognized, a man from my church, Elder Thompson. He'd been one of the most respected members, taught Sunday school, led mission trips, could quote scripture for hours. I'd admired him, but now I saw the truth. He'd spent his entire life judging others, creating complex theological systems that explained why he was saved and most others probably weren't. He died convinced of his own righteousness, and now he was here, alone with his convictions, unable to accept that he'd been wrong. Jesus hadn't rejected him. He'd rejected Jesus, rejected the very concept that he needed grace because he'd believed he'd earned salvation through his correct theology and his religious performance. Can he ever leave? I asked, horrified. The door is always open, Jesus said. Even here, even now, if he would simply admit his need, simply accept grace, simply choose love over judgment, he could leave. But Marcus, the longer someone practices judgment, the harder it becomes to see their need for grace. It's like a muscle that atrophies. Elder Thompson spent 70 years building walls, 70 years positioning himself as righteous, 70 years judging everyone around him. Those walls are thick now. The door is open, but he can't see it anymore. He's convinced himself he doesn't need it. We left that place, and I've never been more grateful for anything in my existence. Back in the light. Back in the presence that was warm and alive, I felt like I could breathe again, though I had no lungs. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Why me? I'm nobody special. I'm just a paramedic from Nashville who thought he was doing okay and turns out was doing everything wrong. Because you're willing to listen, Jesus said. Because underneath your pride, underneath your judgment, there's a genuine desire to know me. Not just know about me, not just perform for me, but actually know me. And Marcus, I can work with that. I can work with brokenness and humility. What I can't work with is someone who's convinced they've already arrived, who thinks they have nothing left to learn, who judges everyone else as lacking while believing they themselves are sufficient. Those are the ones I describe in Revelation chapter 3. You say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing, not realizing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. That's my church, Marcus. That's 97% of the people who claim my name. They think they're rich because they have the right theology, the right church membership, the right religious practices, but they're spiritually bankrupt because they've never truly surrendered, never truly let me transform their hearts. What do you want me to do? I asked. You said I'm going back. What am I supposed to do with this? Jesus looked at me with those eyes that held all of eternity, and he said, tell them about the silent sin. Tell them that I see their thoughts, their judgments, their internal contempt for others. Tell them that they can go to church every Sunday, read their Bibles every day, pray every morning, and still be completely separated from me if their hearts are full of judgment. Tell them that the road to hell isn't paved with obvious sins like murder and adultery. It's paved with respectable sins like judgment and pride and self-righteousness. Tell them that I'm looking for people who know they're broken, who know they're desperate, who approach me with empty hands and humble hearts, not people who approach me with lists of their accomplishments and their correct beliefs. They won't want to hear it, I said. They'll think I'm being too harsh, too judgmental myself. Jesus smiled, a sad but knowing smile. Some will reject it, yes. Some will be offended. Some will accuse you of exactly what you're warning against. But Marcus, there will be others, maybe just a few, maybe more than you think, who will hear the truth in your words, who will recognize themselves in your story, who will finally understand why they feel so distant from me despite doing all the right religious things. Those are the ones I'm sending you back for. Those are the ones who are ready to surrender their judgment and receive grace. He placed both hands on my shoulders, and I felt power flowing from him, not just power, but purpose, identity, mission. You're not going back as the same Marcus who died on that interstate, he said. You're going back changed. You're going back with a message that will cost you. Some people will leave your life. Some will call you a heretic. Some will say you've fallen away from truth. But you'll remember this moment, and you'll know that the only truth that matters is love. Love me, love others, and stop judging. That's the message. That's all it's ever been. I felt myself beginning to fade, or maybe the light was fading, or maybe both. Wait, I said, I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you. Please let me stay. I know, Jesus said, and there was such tenderness in his voice. But Marcus, Grace needs her father. Not you, the other Grace, Ashley's daughter. She's going to face challenges, and her mother will need help. You'll be there for them. And Emma and Caleb need their father. And Sarah needs her husband, the real you, not the version who was performing Christianity. And Marcus, there are people at Station 17, people at Cornerstone Community, people you'll meet in the years ahead who need to hear what you've heard. You have work to do. Not to earn salvation, you can never earn it, but because you've been given it freely, and now you get to give it away freely to others. The light was definitely fading now, or I was falling away from it. I couldn't tell which. How will I remember? I called out. How will I hold on to this when I'm back in my body, back in the world where everything seems so solid and this seems like a dream? You'll remember, Jesus said, and his voice was growing distant but somehow more intimate at the same time, like he was speaking from very far away and from deep inside me simultaneously. I'll make sure you remember. And Marcus, when it gets hard, when people reject the message, when you start to doubt if this really happened, look at your hands. You'll understand then. And then everything went black again. But this time, the black was different. This time, it had weight and pain and noise and the smell of diesel fuel and burnt rubber and blood. This time, it had a body that hurt everywhere, that couldn't move, that was pinned and broken and somehow still alive. I opened my eyes to chaos. Flashing lights, red and blue strobing against a dark sky, voices shouting medical terminology, calling for equipment, coordinating movement. Pain, incredible pain radiating from everywhere at once, my chest, my legs, my back, like my entire body had been put through a shredder and someone was trying to reassemble the pieces. I tried to move and couldn't. Something was holding me down, or maybe I was just too broken to move. I tried to speak and managed only a gurgling sound. Blood in my throat, in my mouth, metallic and thick. "He's got a pulse!" someone shouted. Jake's voice. "Oh my God, he's got a pulse! Marcus, Marcus, can you hear me?" I tried to focus on his face. He was crying, tears streaming down his cheeks, which was wrong somehow. Because Jake never cried, Jake was the calm one, the steady one. "Stay with me, man," he was saying. "Stay with me. We're getting you out. We're going to fix this." But I didn't want to be fixed. I wanted to go back. Back to the light. Back to Jesus. Back to that place where everything made sense and there was no pain. Why had he sent me back to this? Why had he put me back in this broken body, in this broken world? They extracted me, finally, cutting through metal and moving debris with excruciating slowness while I drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time I surfaced, there was more pain, more noise, more hands touching me, assessing damage, starting IVs, immobilizing my spine. I heard someone say multiple fractures, internal bleeding, BP dropping, and someone else say, "Get him to Vanderbilt, trauma alert, move now." The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and sirens and Jake's voice in my ear saying, "Hold on, brother, just hold on." I wanted to tell him I'd been dead. I wanted to tell him I'd seen Jesus. I wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't form words, could barely form thoughts. Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Trauma Bay, bright lights and cold air and a dozen people in scrubs surrounding me, cutting away my uniform, calling out vitals, prepping me for surgery. Someone said I'd been clinically dead for 14 minutes. Someone else said it was a miracle I'd survived. I tried to say it wasn't a miracle, it was a choice, his choice, but the words wouldn't come. And then they put something in my IV, and the world went soft and quiet, and I was unconscious again, but this time it was just darkness, just absence, not the light, not him, and I felt terribly, utterly alone. When I woke up after surgery, it was to the mechanical beep of monitors and the hiss of oxygen and pain that was somehow both more manageable and more real than before. Sarah was there, sitting in a chair beside my bed, her hand wrapped around mine, her head bowed like she was praying. Her face was swollen from crying. When she saw my eyes open, she made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "Marcus," she whispered. "Oh, thank God. Thank God." She squeezed my hand gently, so gently, like she was afraid I might break. The doctors said you died. They said your heart stopped for 14 minutes. Marcus, I thought I'd lost you. I thought the kids had lost you. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube. She held a cup of water with a straw to my lips, helped me take small sips. Finally, I managed to croak out, "I did die." She nodded, thinking I was just confirming what the doctors had said. "But you're back now," she said. "You're here. That's what matters." "No," I said, and my voice was getting stronger. "You don't understand. I died, Sarah. I left my body. I went somewhere. I saw him. I saw Jesus." Her expression changed, became concerned in a different way. "It's okay," she said soothingly. "You've been through trauma. The brain does strange things when it's deprived of oxygen. The doctor said you might have some confusion, maybe some hallucinations. It's normal." "It wasn't a hallucination," I said, frustrated by how weak my voice was, how inadequate words were to convey what I'd experienced. "It was real, more real than this. He showed me things, Sarah. He showed me my whole life, showed me things I've been doing wrong, things I never even knew were wrong. He told me I have to go back and tell people. He said—" I stopped because she was looking at me with worry now, deep worry, and I realized I sounded crazy. "How do you tell someone you died and met Jesus and he gave you a mission? How do you convey an experience that transcends physical reality to someone who's firmly anchored in the physical world?" "Let's talk about it later," Sarah said gently. "Right now, you need to rest. You need to heal. We can process everything once you're stronger." But I couldn't rest. My mind was racing, replaying everything I'd seen, everything he'd told me. The judgments, the 97%, the silent sin destroying the church, the people in that place of separation choosing their pride over grace. I looked at my hands, the ones that weren't immobilized or hooked up to IVs. Jesus had said to look at my hands that I'd understand. But they just looked like hands, battered and bruised with IV lines and hospital tape. What was I supposed to understand? The days in the hospital blurred together. Multiple surgeries to repair internal damage, to set broken bones, to piece me back together. Visitors came. Jake and the guys from Station 17 bringing flowers and balloons and awkward jokes, people from church bringing cards and promises of prayers. Pastor Rick sitting beside my bed and reading Scripture, Psalm 23, Psalm 91, verses about God's protection and deliverance. Everyone was so happy I'd survived, so grateful to God for sparing my life. And I tried to be grateful too, tried to share their joy, but all I could think about was the message, the warning, the thing I was supposed to tell them. About a week into my hospital stay, I tried. Pastor Rick was there during his evening rounds, checking on sick and injured members of the congregation. "Pastor," I said, "I need to tell you something. When I died, I had an experience. I met Jesus." He smiled, that patient pastoral smile. "That's wonderful, Marcus." Many people who go through near-death experiences report feeling God's presence. It's a gift, a reminder of His love. "No," I said, "it was more than that. He showed me something. He showed me that we're doing it wrong. The church, Christians, we're missing the point." Pastor Rick's smile became a little more fixed, a little less warm. "What do you mean?" "We're judging people," I said, "all the time, in our thoughts, in our attitudes. We think we're being righteous, but we're just being proud. Jesus said it's the silent sin that's destroying 97% of believers. We're so focused on being right, on having correct theology, on maintaining standards, that we've forgotten how to love. We've forgotten that we're broken too, that we need grace just as much as anyone else. There was a long pause. Pastor Rick folded his hands, chose his words carefully. Marcus, I think the trauma of what you went through, combined with the medications you're on, might be affecting your perspective. God is certainly a God of love, but He's also a God of truth, of righteousness. We're called to be discerning, to identify sin, to maintain biblical standards. That's not judgment, that's obedience. But that's exactly what he said, I pressed, that we'd call it discernment when it's really judgment, that we justify our pride as righteousness. Pastor, he showed me people, respected Christians, people who did ministry and taught Bible studies and went to church their whole lives, and they were separated from him. Not because of obvious sins, but because their hearts were full of judgment and pride, and they never truly surrendered. Pastor Rick stood up, his expression now definitely concerned. Marcus, I think you need to be very careful about claiming special revelation. We have Scripture, and that's sufficient. Personal experiences, especially ones that occurred during physical trauma, need to be tested against the Word, and what you're describing sounds dangerously close to universalism, to the idea that biblical standards don't matter. That's not what I'm saying, I said, feeling frustrated and exhausted. I'm not saying standards don't matter. I'm saying our hearts matter more than our performance. I'm saying we can follow all the rules and still be completely lost if we're doing it from pride instead of from love. He patted my shoulder, a gesture that somehow managed to be both kind and dismissive. Get some rest, Marcus. Heal up. We'll talk more when you're recovered. And then he left, and I lay there in that hospital bed feeling more alone than I'd felt since coming back. He didn't believe me. He thought I was confused, traumatized, maybe even heretical. And if Pastor Rick didn't believe me, if he couldn't hear what I was trying to say, how was I supposed to reach anyone else? Sarah was different, though it took time. In the weeks after I came home from the hospital, as I slowly regained strength and mobility, she watched me. She noticed that I was different. Fundamentally different, in ways that couldn't be explained by trauma or medication. I stopped making little critical comments about people. I stopped rolling my eyes when she forgot things or when the kids made messes. I started asking her about her day, really asking, really listening. I started playing with Emma and Caleb on the floor despite my injuries, despite the pain, because I'd seen how precious time was and how quickly it could end. One night, about 2 months after the accident, she curled up next to me on the couch and said, "Tell me again. Tell me what you saw. I'm ready to listen now." So I told her. All of it. The light. Jesus. The review of my life, the judgments I'd made that I'd never recognized as sin, the vision of separation, the 97%, the message I was supposed to bring back. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I felt it. Your judgment. All these years. I knew you loved me, but I also always felt like I was falling short, like I wasn't quite enough. I thought it was my own insecurity, but Marcus, it was coming from you. The way you'd sigh when I made mistakes, the look in your eyes when I didn't do things your way. You never said anything mean, but I could feel it. The judgment." I felt my throat tighten. "I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "I know you didn't," she said. "That's what makes it so insidious, right? You didn't mean to. You didn't even know you were doing it. But it was there, this constant measuring, this constant comparison. And Marcus, I did it too. I judged other moms at the kids' school. I judged women at church. I judged myself most of all. We were both doing it, just like you said, and we didn't even realize it was sin. She took my hand. What do we do now? How do we change? I don't know, I admitted. I'm still figuring it out. But I think it starts with paying attention, catching the thoughts as they come. When I start to judge someone, when I start to feel superior or contemptuous, I have to stop and remind myself that they're broken just like me, that they need grace just like me. It's hard, Sarah. It's so hard. The judgments come automatically, like breathing. But every time I catch one, every time I choose compassion instead of contempt, it gets a little easier. Going back to work was complicated. I was on light duty for months, couldn't do the physical demands of active paramedic work. They put me on training and quality assurance, which meant I spent a lot of time reviewing other people's calls, evaluating their performance. The old Marcus would have loved it, would have found satisfaction in pointing out errors, in being the one who knew better. The new Marcus hated it. Every time I read a report and saw a mistake, I had to fight against the instinct to judge, to condemn. Instead, I tried to remember what Jesus had shown me about Tyler, about how he was struggling, about how everyone has a story behind their errors. I started writing feedback differently, focusing on encouragement, on teaching, on building up instead of tearing down. Some of my colleagues noticed, some appreciated it, others thought I'd gone soft. The hardest thing was church. I couldn't sit through services the same way anymore. Every time Pastor Rick preached about righteousness, about maintaining biblical standards, about being separate from the world, I heard the subtext of judgment. I heard the implication that we, the faithful church members, were better than those outside, more pleasing to God, more deserving of His favor. And I'd look around at the congregation, at people nodding along, taking notes, convinced of their own rightness. And I'd see what Jesus had shown me. 97%. Comfortable in their religion, secure in their theology, completely missing the transformation of heart that He actually wanted. I tried to bring it up in Bible study, gently. I shared my experience, not the dramatic parts about dying, but the conviction about judgment. I talked about Matthew 7, about removing the log from our own eye before worrying about the speck in our brother's eye. I talked about how we're all broken, all in desperate need of grace. Robert, the man whose daughter had leukemia, whose faith had been struggling, he got it. His eyes filled with tears, and he said, "That's what I've been trying to say. That's what I've been feeling. Like everyone here has it all figured out, and I'm the only one barely hanging on. And instead of admitting we're all barely hanging on, we just judge each other for not pretending better." But others pushed back. They said I was promoting moral relativism, that I was undermining biblical authority, that if we don't judge sin, then we're condoning it. And I tried to explain that there's a difference between identifying sin and judging people, between speaking truth and positioning yourself as superior, but they couldn't hear it, or wouldn't hear it. One man actually said, "Marcus, I think that accident affected you more than you realize. You're not thinking clearly. You need to trust the teaching you received before, not this new emotional response to trauma." Sarah and I started visiting other churches, trying to find one where the message was about grace and transformation instead of performance and judgment. We tried a few. Some were better than others. But everywhere we went, we saw it. The subtle pride, the comfortable assumption that being a Christian meant being better than others, the judgments dressed up as concern or discernment. Maybe Jesus was right. Maybe it really was 97%. Maybe the American church had become so focused on being right that it had forgotten how to love. About 6 months after my accident, I got a phone call. A woman's voice, hesitant, asking if I was the paramedic who'd been injured at the Interstate 40 accident last October. I said yes. "This is Ashley Morrison," she said. "You saved my life and my daughter's life. I've been trying to find you, to thank you." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop. When I walked in and saw her, holding a baby girl with a full head of dark hair, I felt something shift in my chest. Ashley was young, couldn't have been more than 26, with tired eyes and a genuine smile. "This is Grace," she said, turning the baby toward me. "She's 6 months old now, healthy and perfect. The doctors said if you hadn't shielded me from that second impact, if you hadn't bought those extra minutes, we both would have died." I sat down across from them, looked at little Grace's face, her curious eyes studying me. "I'm just glad you're both okay," I said. Ashley shook her head. "It's more than that. Marcus, I was in a dark place when that accident happened. I was 25, pregnant, single, working 2 jobs just to survive. The baby's father left when he found out I was pregnant. My family disowned me because I wouldn't get an abortion. I was driving home from my evening shift that night thinking that maybe it would be better if I just didn't exist anymore, if I just drove off the road and ended it. I wasn't going to do it, but I was thinking it. And then the accident happened, and you were there, and you held my hand and told me Grace was a beautiful name, and even though I was terrified and in pain, I felt seen. I felt like I mattered to someone." She wiped away tears. "And then I found out you died saving me. That you were crushed trying to protect me. I couldn't understand why someone would do that for a stranger, why you would sacrifice yourself for someone like me." "Someone like you?" I said. "Ashley, you're a person. You're valuable. You matter." "But I'm not," she said. "I'm not valuable. I made mistakes. I got pregnant outside of marriage. I'm not educated, not successful, not religious. I'm nobody. And yet you died for me. And when they told me you came back, that somehow you survived, I thought maybe it was a sign. Maybe God was trying to tell me something." I looked at Grace, sleeping now in her mother's arms, peaceful and perfect, and I understood why Jesus had sent me back. Not just for the message, not just to warn the 97% about their judgment, but for this, for Ashley and Grace. For people who'd been judged their whole lives, who'd been told they weren't enough, who'd been dismissed by the comfortable Christians who had their lives together. "Ashley," I said carefully, "would you be open to hearing about something that happened to me when I died?" She nodded, curious. So I told her. A simplified version, leaving out some of the theological complexity, but telling her the core message, that Jesus sees us not by our performance, but by our hearts. That he doesn't judge us the way religious people judge us. That he died for everyone, for the mistakes and the broken and the people who don't have it all together. That grace isn't something we earn by being good enough. It's something we receive by admitting we're not good enough and never will be. That he loves us radically and completely, not despite our flaws, but through them. She was crying by the time I finished. "I want that," she said. "I want to know him, the way you describe him. Not the angry God my parents talked about, the one who was disappointed in me, the one who actually loves me." Right there in that coffee shop with her baby sleeping and other customers chatting around us, Ashley prayed. Simple, broken, honest. "Jesus, I don't know if I'm doing this right, But Marcus says you love me anyway. I've made so many mistakes. I've felt so alone. But if you really see me, if you really care about me, I want to know you. I want the grace he's talking about. Please help me." And in that moment, watching this young mother surrender her brokenness to the only one who could heal it, I finally understood what Jesus had meant about my hands. I looked down at them, scarred now from the accident, still healing. These hands had held Ashley's hand while she was trapped and dying. These hands had shielded her from the impact that could have killed her. These hands bore the marks of sacrifice, of choosing to protect someone else, even at cost to myself. And isn't that exactly what Jesus did? Isn't that what grace looks like? Not judgment from a distance, but presence in the pain, protection at personal cost, love that literally lays down its life for another. My hands would never be the same after that accident. They ached in cold weather. They couldn't grip things as strongly as before. They bore scars that would never fully fade. But they were useful hands now, broken and healed, marked by sacrifice, capable of holding someone else's pain without adding to it with judgment. That's what Jesus was showing me. That's what transformation looks like. We don't become perfect. We become broken in ways that make us useful, scarred in ways that make us humble, changed in ways that allow us to love others without needing to feel superior to them. I kept in touch with Ashley after that. Helped her find a church community that would embrace her, not judge her. Helped her connect with resources for single mothers. Watched Grace grow. And slowly, over the months and years that followed, I learned to recognize the silent sin in myself faster, to catch the judgments before they took root. It never went away completely. I still have moments where I feel superior, where I judge someone for their failures or their flaws. But now, I recognize it. Now I see it for what it is, a sin as serious as any other, a barrier between me and the God I claim to serve. Sarah and I eventually found a small church, nothing fancy, just a group of people who'd been broken in various ways and found grace together. No spotlight performances, no complex theological systems, just honest worship and genuine community. We started leading a group for people who'd left larger churches, people who'd been wounded by judgment disguised as righteousness, people who were trying to figure out what authentic faith looked like when you stripped away the performance. It's messy and small and sometimes frustratingly slow, but it's real. People actually change there. Hearts actually transform. Because we've all agreed on one foundational truth. We're all broken. We all need grace, and none of us has the right to judge another. I think about that vision Jesus showed me sometimes, the one with 97% of believers trapped in judgment and pride. I think about Elder Thompson, alone with his convictions, unable to accept that he needed grace. I think about how close I came to ending up like him, secure in my religious performance, blind to my spiritual poverty. And I think about the hermetic principle that came to me in the days after my experience when I was trying to make sense of everything Jesus had shown me. As above, so below. As within, so without. The external world reflects our internal state. If we're full of judgment internally, we create separation externally. If we're full of grace internally, we create connection externally. Heaven and hell aren't just future destinations. They're present realities that we create through our choices, through the condition of our hearts, through what we allow to grow in the soil of our souls. You can build heaven around you by choosing love over judgment, by seeing others through the eyes of grace, by recognizing that everyone you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about and deserves compassion, not contempt. Or you can build hell around you by choosing pride over humility, by positioning yourself as the righteous judge of everyone else's flaws, by surrounding yourself with walls that keep others out and eventually trap you in. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. Jesus doesn't force anyone into heaven or hell. He simply honors the reality we create through our choices. That's what I learned when I died and came back. That's what he sent me to share. Not a message of condemnation, but a message of warning. Check your heart. Examine your thoughts. Are you judging others? Are you positioning yourself as superior? Are you maintaining religious performance while your heart remains untransformed? Because if you are, you're building walls instead of bridges. You're choosing separation instead of connection. And if you continue down that path, you might wake up one day, either in this life or the next, and realize you've been working so hard to be right that you forgot how to love. If this message has touched something inside you, if you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to know there's hope. Grace is available right now, in this moment. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to fix yourself first. You just have to be honest about your need for it. Surrender the pride. Surrender the judgment. Surrender the illusion that you're better than others. Come to Jesus with empty hands and a humble heart, and he'll give you what you've been searching for through all your religious performance. Genuine connection with him, genuine transformation of your heart, genuine love for others that doesn't require feeling superior to them. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's trapped in religious performance, someone who's judging their way through life while thinking they're being righteous, share this with them. Sometimes God uses a stranger's near-death experience to wake up a sleeping church. Sometimes it takes someone who died and came back to deliver a message that the comfortable don't want to hear. But for the ones who are ready, for the ones who are tired of performing and ready for transformation, this might be exactly what their souls have been crying out for. I'm still here. Still working as a paramedic, still trying to live out what Jesus showed me. I'm not perfect. I still judge sometimes. I still slip back into pride. But I catch it faster now. I recognize it sooner. And every time I choose grace over judgment, every time I choose love over contempt, I feel a little more connected to him, a little more aligned with the heart of Jesus, who died not for the righteous but for the broken, not for those who have it all together, but for those who are honest enough to admit they never will. That's the message. That's what he sent me back to say. The silent sin of judgment is destroying his church, but it doesn't have to destroy you. You can choose differently, starting right now. Look at your thoughts. Examine your heart. And when you catch yourself judging, stop and remind yourself, they're broken too. They need grace too. And I'm in no position to cast stones because I'm just as desperate for mercy as they are. That's when real Christianity begins. Not when you get your theology right, not when you perfect your religious performance, but when you finally understand that you're a beggar showing other beggars where to find bread. May you find that bread. May you taste that grace. And may you share it freely with everyone you meet, without judgment, without conditions, just pure, unfiltered love that reflects the heart of the one who died for us all. That's my prayer for you. That's my prayer for the 97%. That's my prayer for the church. Wake up, beloved. Come home to grace before it's too late.